Oh, happy Thursday to you, Wichita. Here on 1410 AM, 93.9 FM, KGSO, this is the Press Box. Jacob Zimmerman, Sasha, Bouska, both inside the Seven Clans First Council Casino Hotel and Resort Studios. Having herself a wonderful afternoon. 522-1410 is the phone line, as always, courtesy of Maximum Outdoor Equipment. Sasha, that's going to be a busy one to start the show, as we've got something fun planned for today.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Let's get to it.
Usually we kind of have a normal guest lineup. I know in about 25 minutes or so, we'll have Noah Sacco calling in from Cake Sports. But to kick off the show, we had to move this up a little early. The man himself, Paul Mills from Wichita State Basketball, joins us now. Coach Mills, how are you?
I'm great, Jacob. Sasha, thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So, Coach, this is going to be year 3 for you with the Shockers. Does this one feel a little different? Are you more used to Wichita now?
Definitely more used to Wichita. You know, as I mentioned before, I've grown up in Texas, specifically Houston, and traveled around, and we are not very obedient in regards to following the speed limit. And I've been really impressed when you're in Wichita. People are very obedient, and if it says 40, they go 40. And so I've gotten used to it. I'm just used to you fly here, you fly there, you go well past the speed limit because you are trying to avoid traffic. And it could happen at any moment. But I am used to everybody being very obedient here, and I think I've become way more compliant.
Well, there you go, Coach. I am also relatively new to Wichita myself. Kind of my whole tenure, you've been the man at the helm for the Shockers. So you're all I know. Coach, let's get into the season here. I feel like our interview today is pretty appropriate given that, hey, the preseason poll just came out for the American. The coaches poll slots you guys 5th. Do you have any comments on where you see yourself in this conference?
I think everybody sees themselves as first, you know, wherever it is that you're picked. I think 2 years ago, the team that won the league was picked next to last. Last year, I think Tulane was picked next to last, and they finished in the top 4. So, you know, it's a whole bunch of guessing, usually by people who are trying to figure out what the previous teams return. And the reality for our situation when you're in the American Conference, it is the most poached league in all of college basketball and has been for the last 7 years. So there's a lot of turnover in this league. And so people guess based on what you have, what you brought in. And it's, you know, nobody gives you a medal if you were even picked first. So I don't know how much credence it actually gives, but it's one of those things that prognosticators think through and they look at, and I think it's more an evaluation tool. Am I good at prognosticating or am I not at the end of the year? So we'll see how all of this plays out, but there's obviously a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the unknowns and the roster turnover. It's hard to even know if your own team's good, let alone look across the landscape and know who's good out there.
That is very true.
With that in mind, a lot of new faces coming into the team this year. Is there anyone, because you go out on the recruiting trail or you watch guys' college film and you bring in transfers or new freshmen and you think you know what you have, but then they get to campus and that's a whole different level of being with them. Is there anyone in particular that's surprised you a lot since they've come onto campus this year?
Well, I'm going to answer your question, but on a side note, have you ever once heard a coach said, we had an awful summer and we're actually worse than what I anticipated?
That's a good point.
I mean, everybody's going to tell you how great a summer they had in order to get prepared for the season, and they're going to tell you about 4 or 5 kids, maybe an entire roster, that is better than what you anticipated. And I will tell you that we have a player from Seton Hall who transferred to us. He was at Louisville prior to that. And Emmanuel Corafor, that, you know, just physically he was what we were looking for, but skill-wise he is actually better. You know, I just think the things that he's able to do, and it wasn't as if I had low expectations either. And then I think the players that we thought were going to be good, you know, have been. And we've been fortunate. I mean, this past week we've had all 15 guys practice. I can't recall in my 31 years of doing this ever having everybody being able to go from for an entire week during this time of the year. So it's been good. The competition's been good, but there are so many unknowns, and it's why I'm excited about playing another team in Drake on Saturday, and then we'll actually scrimmage Santa Clara the following weekend. So these are really good tests for us, but it is to get answers to those questions that you just mentioned. You think you know, but you need to see it with your own eyes.
Talking with Paul Mills, of course, the head man of Wichita State men's basketball, joining us now in the press box on KGSO. Coach, Sasha kind of brings up the point about the portal. You mentioned Emmanuel Corafor. I was kind of watching the portal pickups that you had back earlier in the year one by one, and I kind of had a thought for a moment in time, like, I'm kind of noticing the play style maybe is a little similar with some of these players. I know you just lost Xavier Bell and Quincy Ballard, some longtime guys with this program. Did you kind of specifically look for skill sets that you desired or skill sets that you had with previous players in the past? Or was it kind of a case in the portal of we just want to take the best possible players we can?
It's definitely a combination of two. I mean, both of those school of thoughts are in play. We lost a guy last year. Ronnie DeGray went down the third game of the year and had a fractured hand. And, once we entered into conference and he didn't play, you could tell what an experienced defensive-minded guy, the value that he added. And then he got healthier, and then we were able to run off 6 games in a row and be able to be good down the stretch. But, you're hoping a Karan Boyd, who's Defensive Player of the Year in the SoCon, that there's carryover. You have a guy at 6'5" who can guard multiple positions and 1 through 4 and can be whoever your best player is. He's excited about drawing the assignment that night. So there was an indication from us to our staff and to people that we knew were in the transfer portal that we were trying to find a defender, and we do feel like Karan fit that. If you go back and look at the numbers, we were the number 1 team in the country at getting shots at the rim. And that's by intention. We talk a lot philosophically about how to play with force, and we want to put pressure on the rim. If we can get as many layups or dunks as possible, we're trying to. But teams just don't let you go in there and dunk the ball. And when teams collapsed and we sprayed it out, we just had trouble knocking down perimeter shots. And I thought it would be better, but it just didn't translate to a level until late in the year. And I feel like we've addressed that. We've been able to bring in 3 guys, Kenyon Giles, who is predicted as a first-team All-League guys in the preseason poll, Michael Gray and Brian Amunique, who all shot better than 40% at their previous institution. So there was that. And then we needed depth at the front court. Quincy Ballard was great. Mate Bosnick filled in some holes when Quincy went to the bench. But really feel like with the guys we added and Will Berg, who – to be honest with you, you're not going to have much time to develop a lot of guys. So you have to get guys who've been at winning programs, who come from winning programs, who kind of understand what it looks like. And, Will being at Purdue, being a part of a national championship team or national championship game, and just going against Zach Edey every day, we thought that was going to help. And then Noah Hill was a signee who we feel really good about. He's kind of an undersized 5, but plays like a 5 in the fact that he's going to be an above-the-square guy, and then Emmanuel Okorafor, who I mentioned earlier. So I think all of those come into play. Finding a defensive guy, making sure you can get some depth who at the guard spot who could shoot, and at the same time finding depth in the front court.
Yeah, absolutely. Coach, you talked about talent, and you talked about depth, and I even I knocked on some wood for you when you talked about all 15 guys practicing right now, because that's music to the ears of Shocker fans.
Does that actually do anything?
I don't know if it does anything or not, but I'm going to operate under the premise that it does. But
gotcha.
Outside of talent and depth, one of the maybe underrated things about coaching a college basketball team or having a successful college basketball team in today's world is how the team gels together. Do you have any strategies or anything going on the team right now where you say these guys are going to play well together? They're not just a group of good basketball players. They're a team of basketball players. How do you judge that early in the year?
Yeah, I lived right across the street my time in Houston from the Houston Rockets practice facility, and you may know this name, but Rudy Tomjanovich was the head coach there. And I remember he told me one day, I was sitting there watching practice, and he mentioned to me, he said, the goal isn't to accumulate talent. The goal is to assemble a team. And that's always stuck with me. So your comment there about how do you assemble a team, you definitely think through that. There's a whole bunch of combinations sometimes in your mind that you think work, and you practice those, and you try not to practice them for just a day. You try to give guys, if we think these 5 guys are really fitting together, you try to give them 4 or 5 days, sometimes a week, in order to gel before you move on to a different combination. But, you know, we've been able to do that. We've actually been practicing since June. I don't know how a lot of schools do it, but they give us 4 hours a week. So every Tuesday and Thursday since June, we've had 2-hour practices that were focused on the team. So we've been able to get an idea collectively about, man, this is a unit that really gels together, and this will be an experiment as we move forward. There's a bunch of numbers and analytics and things that go into it in order to decipher what's your best opportunity in order to put a defensive team or an offensive team or some combination of the two. So I do think it's a work in progress. And there'll be some good things on Saturday. There'll be some bad things on Saturday when we scrimmage Drake, but it really is as we're sifting through this process.
Talking with Paul Mills today here on the Press Box. Coach, you mentioned assembling a team that can really gel with each other. I think a common thought that's going around with a lot of different fan bases in certain cities around the country, but especially here in Wichita with Shocker alum, Shocker crazies. Look, I think once you assemble the team, then the difficulty once you near the offseason is retention, right? Keeping everybody back. I may have heard some quotes from you or other coaches in the past about this. But do you feel like the role of a head coach now in college sports has sort of changed? Do you kind of feel like you have to put your eggs almost in the recruitment basket? You're almost like having to make a pitch to these guys every offseason. And I've had some comments here just thinking out loud as far as, man, maybe the friendship between player and coach really matters nowadays when it comes to retaining these superstar athletes. So, Coach, do you have any comments on that as far as the difficulty you may now see or other coaches see as far as retaining talent?
Yeah, I think there has to be a vision in place. I mean, it isn't as if your relationship with a player is, you know what, you get together every night and play 2K.
Right.
You know, I think the coach-player relationship is the player has to know that you have their best interest and that you actually believe that not only are they good enough, but two, that there's a plan in place for them to get better. And I mean, you being sports guys, you follow college football, and hey, my dog's barking, so I got to tell him not to bark. Come here, Bear. I got to put him out. Hang on. And I would tell you this whole process, you following college football, I mean, there's a team that returned a lot of their players that thought they were going to be good, and it just hasn't transpired so far. And then you have Bill Belichick bringing in a whole bunch of guys, and that hasn't. So there's a lot of different ways to do that, and the vice versa is true too. I mean, you've had guys who retain some guys, and that's translated. So I don't know that there's necessarily a formula. I do think that players at the end of the day know if they're getting better. This is not an opinion. This is a fact. Quincy Ballard is the most improved player in the country the past 2 years. Wow. And from a simply analytical standpoint, if you go look at Kim Pomeroy, which judges players, Xavier Bell was ranked 91st out of the 93 players who played in the American Conference. Well, then after a year, he turned into a first-team All-League guy. So we've been able to get guys better. And I think that if players know, man, you know what? One, I can trust you. Whatever it is you say, you actually do. And then two, there is a plan in place for me to get better. Then they have to evaluate it from there on out, you know. But whatever is important to them, they begin to search for, and it could be a variety of things from compensation to development, and it varies from player to player and their families on what's important. But I think players need to know, one, they can trust you, and two, there's a plan in place. And we definitely try to work through that with every single player we have.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of fans may not – players, by and large, want to be coached. They don't want a friend. They want a coach, and I think everything you're saying there is spot on for sure. I want to switch gears a little bit here. In the offseason, you hired one of my favorite Shockers of all time from his playing days, P.J. Cousinard. What has it been like having a former Shocker who played in a different era for the Shockers on board with the staff to maybe kind of talk about the tradition of the team, or how has he imparted that to the players at all?
Yeah, known PJ, watched him, for a long time. When I was an assistant at Baylor, was aware of all of his accomplishments there in Yates, and being a Houston guy, followed him pretty closely as he went on to his career here. And, I'm reminded of the Sweet 16 game and his performance there in order to propel the Shockers into the Sweet 16 over Tennessee. And to watch his progress, even when I was at Baylor and then when I was at Oral Roberts, would recruit his guys. And so I watched PJ run a lot of practices. I saw how committed he was to his players. I saw how much he helped them go on and get to the next level. And I always thought, that PJ and I had actually talked about him coming on before, but the timing just didn't work out for him or for us. And so when this opportunity came up, he was actually the only call that I actually made for that particular spot, and I was glad that he accepted it. But it is he's got a special, unique ability to connect with players, but not just connect in order to help them get better. It's unique and connected in a way that can kind of speak to the relevance of this program and what it's meant to him. So it's a really, really personal story that he's able to tell, and he's been able to translate it really well, and he's been a phenomenal addition for us.
And last one for you, Coach, real quick. I broadcasted all the TBT games of the Aftershocks here on KGSO back in the summer. The attendance was what it was, Coach. Is that a motivational factor to you?
Yeah, there's a part of you that thinks, like, man, the Ron Bakers, the Fred Van Fleets of the world, like, are those days done? Will players stay in the same location for 4 years and watch grow with the fans as the fans become more accustomed to them? So the one thing that was encouraging in this NIL era that we are in college athletics is the truth is the TB team is an NIL team. Zach and Garrett and JR, guys who are former Shockers, they put that team together. And they have to, these are pros, and so they get a little bit of compensation in order to come together. They hope it pays off at the end. There's only one team that it's going to pay off at the end for. And so I'm glad it was the Shockers. But to watch the support, all around the city, to watch that Saturday game in July, people have options in July. It's 0 degrees outside, and so we're trying to find someplace warm in order to entertain ourselves. So to watch that crowd and to realize, and if you go back and look, the vast majority of the players who were contributing, especially late in games, were not Shockers. And you just knew the city was behind it because it was happening here. So as one of my assistants says, we have the biggest party in Wichita, and we need to make sure it's a good party. And so we have a responsibility to make sure that there's a product on the floor that people desire to see and play in such a way that people desire to show up and to spend their hard-earned dollars on. But I will tell you that it's a huge takeaway from TBT, and it was also really inspiring to see how the city got behind them.
Look, folks, Paul Mills mentioned a party. He might even be talking about what's going down Saturday at 1 o'clock. Sasha and I are going to be there watching alongside the scrimmage against Drake. Coach Paul Mills of the Wichita State Shockers, thanks so much for the time.
Jacob, Sasha, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Best of luck this season. When we come back, Noah Sacco from Cake Sports will join the show on the Maximum Outdoor Equipment phone lines. We'll get to some